Hi everyone, welcome to another session from MakerDAO. My name is Juan. I'm the facilitator of the Sustainable Ecosystem Scaling Core Unit. And today we will focus on the Deco or Deco protocol, which are bringing an interesting solution to change variable fees for fixed fees. So I don't want to take anyone's thunder. I see that Bams is already sharing screen. So yeah, as always, if you want to intervene or ask any questions, feel free. And yeah, without further ado, Bams, if you want to introduce yourself for those that don't know the legend.
Hey everyone. Again, excited to be here and basically be presenting this proposal. Quick background, I've been like around Maker for, I don't know, a really long time. I've been part of the community. I've worked at the foundation as in the integrations team since like 2018 until a couple months back. And yeah, let's get started. Just trying to set my screen up. You weren't supposed to see that yet. So basically, like, yeah, today I'm here to present Deco and specifically the integration that we're proposing, like with Maker to achieve like what I'm calling it fixed rate vaults, right? Like as everybody knows, like Maker currently, like the vaults that we do are like variable rate. So the stability fee changes when Maker governance basically sets them, and vault owners just continuously like pay that stability fees over time. And so there have been like multiple attempts at like creating fixed rate protocols, but basically what fixed rate protocol or fixed rate vault means that a vault owner locks into a fixed rate upfront for a certain duration, and then at the like basically like they're shielded, or at least like so that becomes the rate that they end up paying for using like for borrowing like for that duration. So this proposal has a couple layers. So I think as we go through this presentation, right, I'd recommend like you relate the concepts or the components back to a certain layer, so that you can like I guess like make a little bit more sense. So we have the Maker layer, like let's call it the base asset, or where that's where the DAI stable coin lives, that's where the vaults live, that's where the variable stability stability fees are. The layer above that, it's a yield token layer. It's basically a special yield token that we are proposing. We've been thinking about fixed rates for a long time, and we had this like aha moment a couple months back actually, and then we're like, like what if we just tokenized the stability fee rate itself and created a yield token out of it? Would that help? And then we had like Deco on our hands, so we played with a few concepts, and then we realized there's a neat integration that could happen. And basically the outcome of that integration is like we think Maker becomes the fixed rate lending protocol. Like it is a lending protocol. It's a variable rate lending protocol, if we have to like call it that. But the outcome is basically like the outcome that we saw was like Maker itself becoming a fixed rate lending protocol. And but by that I mean like in terms of like how the feature is, right? The feature is has to be like native or behave like almost as if it were a native feature. So that's the yield token layer. We'll dive into that, like what we call these like fee tokens or fee yield tokens. And then finally we have the Deco layer, and I'll explain like why you see like two different tokens there, but that's the third layer. So definitely, I don't know how many of you have seen this meme before. I'll give you a moment, but will be something like the movie Inception. So we'll dive down like these layers like one by one, and then understand the whole proposal. But the big thing that I want you to like focus on is just the claim fee token, claim fee ETH token, like that's labeled there. That forms the basis of the entire user experience. So we've heard some feedback that this is like this looks like too complicated, or it's like it looks too complex. So that's why I wanted to like highlight this, especially because vault owners, Maker to a certain extent, you like all they have to deal with is these claim fee ETH tokens. Those form the basis of the entire user experience. Everything else is like supporting infrastructure. That's like mostly set up once, or at least like for each collateral type, and then it basically is used continuously. So let's dive into the user experience part to see like how this might work. So like I said, like the claim fee token forms the basis of the user experience. So the first step is those being issued. So the issuance is always going to be like under the control of Maker. So Maker decides when, how much, and for what duration it wants to issue claim fee tokens. Sure, there could be demand from like vault owners, right? But it's going to be up to Maker to issue them and satisfy that demand. Like
Sí, un peu
fully
joué, rien.
under, yeah. So, sorry. So basically, yeah. So claim fee tokens are issued by Maker, and Maker like will set the terms. So this is basically a mouthful if you read the entire thing. I'll explain the components here. So the first thing is a balance. So a balance is basically a number. It's a fungible number. The reason it's fungible, like one way to think about it is like you could have like, for example, created something that just works for like one vault and exactly like what that vault has, right? Instead, we made this fungible. So it's up to the vault owner to decide. The balance exactly should track the amount of debt that a vault has. Let's say a vault has like 100,000 in debt. All the vault owner has to do is purchase 100,000 claim fee tokens to offset. If they don't want to offset the entire amount, they could purchase 50,000. If they want to offset it for like a shorter duration and the tokens are trading, like they could purchase a shorter duration. It's completely flexible. Like having a balance like adds that extra flexibility. And like they've reduced the debt on their vault, like partway through, they could sell off the excess and then just continue to hold a smaller number without losing the entire hedge, right? All sorts of things like that could be done. So claim fee itself has a token type. So it's claim fee and ETH. What we mean by that is basically that these tokens are set up for each collateral type. So claim fee ETH is set up to track the stability fee of ETH, ETH, ETC, WBTC, ABC, maybe RWA, who knows. So we set up a claim fee token type for each collateral type. If like, I mean, it's up to rates, right? It's all about rates. If Maker is moving like rates for like, let's say WBTC, A and ETH, the rates are just going to be equal always, then maybe you could do like one, but overall, like, yeah, claim fee token type is linked to basically a collateral type. And then we have the issuance and maturity dates. So issuance and maturity is simply track the duration for which this token earns that yield. So claim is this something, I mean, we're calling it a pure yield token. What it means is that from issuance to maturity, it would earn the yield like from whatever rate it's tracking, and it would give that back to the holder, and that's it. After maturity, it's like it's worthless again. The tokens basically are burnt and they disappear. So it's like so that's why it's a pure yield token, and that's if this token tracks the stability fee. It can act as a perfect hedge for vault owners, right? Whose own like debt is volatile exactly at that rate, the stability fee rate. So that's why it's like they'd be interested in purchasing them to offset that variability. So that's issuance. And I mean, in the future, we could think about on-demand issuance, but what we really are thinking about right now is basically standard terms. Like once every month, like the issuance occurs like for a 3-month duration, and Maker could add more liquidity to the exact same duration. It's not like just because claim tokens are being issued today means the issuance date changes to today, and there's like fragmentation and liquidity. So Maker picks the standard dates and then can add like as much liquidity as like Maker wants to those dates based on demand. like every day, every week, or every month. And once they expire, like basically like new standard periods are introduced. So the claim tokens are actually issued by Maker. They're not yet in circulation or in the market. So since these are tokens, like literally, like, I mean, sky is the limit on how like Maker wants to sell them, or Maker, the Maker protocol could sell them. But I mean, everybody's been talking about AMMs. We have like couple different AMMs, like specifically designed for fixed rate tokens. All of them are options. But one particular, I'm just using this opportunity to highlight like one particular option that I think could be like a compelling way to sell these tokens. It's basically like using something like Gnosis Protocol V2 and Maker like starting auctions of these tokens. So the cool thing about like starting an auction is basically, so let's say Maker gets to define the rate, the minimum rate that it wants to get. So let's say like the current floating rate is 1%, and then like add a bunch of premium to that, because this is Maker is providing a hedge to vault owners. And then Maker says, okay, like the risk team says like 2% is going to be like good. This is typically the rate that Maker would like normally set, right? And vault owners, like when it's a deal for them, they just pay that and then that's it. But the interesting thing with doing an auction here is that that's a limit order. And then you start an auction for like, let's say, I don't know, 6 hours, 24 hours. Now, vault owners who probably would know like the most about the market, if there's anyone in this market that knows about like demand supply leverage, they would know. And if Maker can induce a little bit of competition, they could participate in like bidding, and they could bid that rate up. So in a way, it's like by using auctions, by using a variety of sale mechanisms, Maker can like force the market to reveal private information. And there's no channel like for vault owners to reveal, or a reason for vault owners to reveal that information yet. But maybe like by inducing a bidding war in an auction, like by making sure that you're not selling too much, but you're not selling too little, like over time, like could figure out like a way and get the market to reveal some information about like the rates. Just a thought. I'm not sure if it'll exactly play out that way, but there's a nature, there's like a way to use like market mechanisms here as an option. Like we all have the like current options, right? But this is like something in addition to that. These are ERC20 tokens. So basically like, yeah. So that's the auction. And then like, yeah, let's say a vault owner like purchases them. So this is the other big contribution from us, is we are not asking the vault owner to do anything with their existing vault. So they're using DeFi Saver, they're using like any vault management, they're using a collateral type, everything just stays as is. They don't have to do anything with their existing vault. They have the tokens, and so a purchase, so that's one transaction. A minimum of like a second transaction, which is basically like the collect the yield that they want. So we'd probably like develop a UI, probably something as simple as this for version 1. It would have a collect button. It would display like the claim tokens that they have, that a vault owner has, the yield that it has earned. And that yield would actually be like the same additional debt that their vault currently has, because it's a regular vault and a regular like stability fee is being applied to it. And we could either like just develop something that they collect the DAI and then it's up to do what they want to do with it, or we could automate that to like collect it and then just pay back debt and bring it back to the fixed amount on their thing. I think having like both numbers separately, I think it'll work out because the compounding is the same. It's the exact same stability fee rate that it would be tied to. So I'm not sure yet. We are planning to run some numbers, but I think they would exactly compound at the same rate. So after maturity, they would exactly have enough to offset everything that was increased, the additional debt that they have on their vault. And so basically, yeah, 3 steps. Maker issues the tokens, like finds a way to sell them to vault owners. Vault owners purchase them and execute a collect transaction towards the end to offset the yield on their vault. And that's basically.
Vamsi, quick question before, just to test my understanding. If let's say I purchase this claim token and the stability fee doesn't change, then the yield would be 0. Is that correct?
So the stability fee doesn't change would just mean that no. So the yield won't be 0. Like whatever the stability fee is, whether it changes or not, it would still be applied to the regular vault, and the token that they've purchased like would yield the same amount. It just would so happen that the purchase price or that the vault owner paid to purchase the claim fee tokens and the yield that they received from it would exactly match, because the variable rate and the fixed rate that they got in the purchase process would basically match. But they would still, like, the regular rate would still apply on their vault, whatever the rate is, and it would be paid out of their like claim fee tokens.
Okay.
There's a question in the chat about the, upon issuance, can vault owners purchase claim tokens, and then can claim tokens be liquid on secondary markets for anybody?
It's up to like, they're designed to be ERC20 tokens. So they can be liquid if Maker wants. It doesn't see that as a problem. Like see it as like not just like vault owners, but like anybody else like using it. If Maker is comfortable, Maker is getting like some information out of it. Maker, there are a list of benefits that Maker gets from just selling them. If that becomes a problem, we'll have to find a way to like restrict them to be used like along with vaults. But they can be like, if restrictions are not placed, they can be traded.
Okay, but like initially only the vault owner can purchase them, or it can be anybody?
Can be anyone. If you're not doing like something like a proof of having a vault as part of that sale process, like if you're not asking like the buyer to prove that they have a vault and only then like letting them purchase, we could. But the thing with Maker Protocol is like in the territory of flash loans, most of these like restrictions could be bypassed easily. So anybody could purchase these like claim fee tokens. Then so I guess like basically like again, the point that I wanted to make here was like user experience is just centered around one token, and users need not like worry about the complexity of like the infrastructure that's set up. I mean, if you're calling it complex, I think it's simple. So we have that, and then like now we'll step down into the other layers. So I'm assuming everybody on this call like is well aware of like the Maker layer, right? Vaults, debt, stability fees. So we'll skip the base layer, and then we'll step into the yield token. So a quick refresher on how like yield tokens work. So you have like, so a yield token is basically a regular ERC20. We can think about them as a regular ERC20 token, right? You have a yield token balance, you can transfer them around. But almost like all yield protocols or yield tokens come with like some form of a deposit function and some form of a withdraw function. Could be like Compound, with you deposit your DAI to get CDAI and you withdraw CDAI back to DAI. Could be Uniswap, where you supply liquidity into a pool, that's the deposit. You get LP shares, and then you redeem the LP shares back for like the whatever you're owed. So most yield protocols come with like a deposit step, like deposit and withdraw functions. So throughout the process, like usually the balance that a user gets stays constant, right? It's not that their balance is changing, but they still earn more yield. The reason that works out is because every single yield token holder shares a constant like multiplier. So you have a static balance and you have like a multiplier that gets updated as yield accrues for the entire protocol. So we see here, somebody has deposited 100 DAI into Chai. They receive 95.323 Chai. Like, let's say the multiplier is 1.05. So it's still 100 DAI, but 95.23 times 1.05. So they have like 95.23 Chai. They just hold it for a year, 2 years. And let's say DSR was 20%. At withdraw time, their 95.23 Chai stays the same, but the multiplier would have increased. So that means they're now able to take out like 120 DAI from the yield protocol. So that's basically how like yield tokens in general work. The multiplier is slightly different based on the protocol. Sometimes it's calculated as a share of reserves, the total reserves that a protocol owns. But it's something that you can think about it in the terms of a multiplier that increases constantly. And yeah,
there's a great question in the chat from Planet X. He asks, what happens if I forget about my claim fee ETH tokens? Do they lose all value?
So if you forget your claim fee ETH tokens, basically what happens is for claim fee ETH, the DAI that claim fee ETH needs to get is always like held by Deco. So let's say like between issuance and maturity, about like 50 DAI was earned. That 50 DAI will stay locked inside like Deco for the user to claim, like until even after emergency shutdown, they would still have it. They would be able to like take it out as DAI, and let's say even the Maker protocol was shut down, right? They would be take that DAI then and then like go back and redeem. So we'll get into the Deco protocol part, and I'll show you like how that accounting works in Deco. It's super simple, and how it's like doing that. But nothing really happens. The DAI that's earned just stays there. So this is like, yeah, just continuation of like what I was saying. Example yield tokens, like everything, right? Everything from Chai, CDAI, Uniswap. So the other example here, like somebody deposits 100 DAI. During the deposit step, you divide it by the common number, and then you get 100 CDAI. 5% a year later, you multiply your CDAI by the current multiplier number times 1.05, you get 105 DAI. If somebody is depositing at that time, the multiplier is already 1.05. So it would like 100 DAI deposit divided by 1.05, they would only get 95.23 CDAI. So that's how it works. For the rest of the presentation, I'm going to assume a multiplier of 1, just to make like the numbers a bit more clear. But the numbers track, and even when you see like even like basically the numbers track. And we'll just assume like the multiplier of 1 to make things like slightly simple at issuance. So that is basically like yield tokens and generally like how they work. So a fee token, we're calling it a token, actually need not be a token, but think about it as a pot contract. It's nothing fancy is going on. It's like a pot or a chai token, right? Basically. And all it does is the rate function inside, basically the drip function, tracks the stability fee of a collateral type. So which means that 100 DAI deposit into the fee yield token, specifically, let's say the fee ETH yield token, with the stability fee of like 5%, right? On average, after multiple changes for a year, would become like 105 DAI, like at withdrawal time. So it's basically like what I want to tell here is that fee token is almost like chai or pot. It just tracks the stability fee. Obviously, we've basically like limited. So that's fee token, and then finally we are at the Deco layer. Like let's dive into this. Then I'll explain a little bit more. So on the Deco layer, so now we have the fee token. There's a 100 DAI deposit that that basically like Maker puts in, and then like generates the fee tokens. We don't want those fee tokens to just circulate like indefinitely, right? We don't want them to ever like go into the hands of users. So which is where Deco comes in. So Deco is the one that slaps a maturity date on them. And after like adding a maturity date, it splits it into like two components called zero and claim at issuance. So for a 100 DAI deposit, like Deco receives, let's say 100 DAI, it creates two tokens, zero, like 100 DAI goes into the fee token, and then like Deco receives the fee tokens. But overall, like Deco is like receives 100 DAI. It creates two tokens like zero fee and claim fee, attaches a maturity date. Now these are the promises that it will make, right? So nobody knows what the yield is going to be for a year. They have expectations of what the stability fees are going to be over a year, but nobody knows for sure. It might as well be zero, and like the actual rate is zero, or the yield itself is zero, which means that then what Deco would do is basically it would take the original deposit and give it entirely to the zero holder. So the claim fee token holder gets nothing. There's no yield, they get nothing. So you can see that even in an extreme scenario where there is no yield, there's no solvency issue here, because Deco holds on to the entire deposit upfront. Like all the obligations that it has in the future, it holds out on, it receives them at issuance, like at the initial deposit. So that's the no yield scenario. Obviously, there's going to be some yield. Everybody expects the stability fee to be something. So which means the claim fee, if there is a certain yield, like let's say 20 DAI in yield, what Deco would do at settlement is give the zero fee holder the 100 DAI back. So that's why it's a zero coupon bond. Like deposit 100 DAI, or like Deco can tell upfront like how much a zero fee holder gets exactly. So they know for sure like exactly what they would get at maturity. So that's the zero fee part. All the excess yield, basically the part that's unknown like upfront, goes to the claim fee holder. So Deco handles that settlement basically, and Deco keeps track of these historical like yield values. So which it uses at settlement time, and passes on like just the yield part to claim fee, and the rest to the original deposit, basically back to like the zero fee token. So now we can see why like vault owners like might be interested in just the yield component, right? It exactly offsets the variable rate on their vault. So they'd be willing to pay like a purchase price upfront to get their hands on this token, and then use that like to offset like whatever the yield ends up being. So that is that's basically like what's happening. Like we're proposing like a fee token whose issuance is under the control of Maker, locking it into Deco to generate these two tokens, and then like trying to sell claim fee tokens to vault owners. The question is, where is this 100 DAI coming from? Like this required a 100 DAI deposit, actual deposit. And that deposit needs to be held in Deco for the entire duration of the, like from issuance to settlement, which could be like 3 months, 6 months after. That definitely is not coming from vault owners, because the vault owners want to spend their DAI debt like on, like, I don't know, buying a car, like paying off their other debt, using it to buy more ETH. So somebody else has to supply that 100 DAI. That is like the problem that we've solved. Like we could have basically, like one way in which we could have like taken this was said, like we could have just assumed like there would be a buyer for those tokens, and then when there's a buyer, it would like the vault owners would take the opposite side, and they would receive a fixed rate hedge, like a variable rate hedge. But instead of making that assumption, like we've basically like looked at all like fixed rate protocols, and I mean, I haven't like done a deep dive, but almost everybody is facing like liquidity issues. They're just not able to convince somebody like a DAI or a stable coin or a yield token holder who's receiving like variable yield. They're just not able to convince them to convert them into like zero coupon bonds and earn a fixed savings rate. They're at least not able to do it at scale. Like at Maker scale, we want like I don't know, 100 million, 200 million, 300 million, like in a zero coupon bond, like zero coupon like liquidity. So instead of trying to like find like a buyer and I don't know, have an uncertain user experience, what we did was we found a way to basically like push it back into Maker as collateral to basically offset the DAI that was used for issuance as like debt. The reason we're able to do that is because it's like, as we've seen, the DAI is accounted for upfront, and like Zero would be able to give the exact amount of DAI back after maturity to basically like pay back that debt. So this is like if you're like looking at this picture, please look at the loop on the left hand side. You're starting off with a flash loan of 10 million DAI. You're depositing it into the spot contract, right? That's your initial deposit, and it's giving you 9 million fee ETH because that's the yield token mechanics. It's 9 million fee ETH, but it tracks like 10 million in notional amount. So that doesn't change, which means like when Deco issues like zero and claim, it would issue like 10 million zero fee ETH and 10 million claim fee ETH. So 10 million claim fee Ether goes out into an auction. The 10 million zero fee, like, we're proposing an adapter and a single like zero vault. So it gets deposited as collateral to generate the 10 million DAI to pay back that flash loan. So that issuance is complete in one transaction, one step. And after maturity, Deco basically like pushes the DAI back into the vault, the DAI that it receives, right? Zero converts to DAI exactly at the same number, pays off the debt. The claim fee becomes worthless. Everything like gets removed. If emergency shutdown gets triggered, we have something called close. It doesn't matter like what maturities are in circulation. The DAI is already in the Deco protocol. Don't have to wait for like some other lending, like for instance, like other lending protocols might have to wait for other borrowers to pay back their loans, right? To get that liquidity to pay back this debt. This is all accounted for like within and under the control of Maker itself. So it's just like if emergency shutdown gets triggered, the DAI is just used to account for the debt, and then the debt is removed. I mean, yeah.
Is it fair to say that the problem that you solve with this design is that you don't require demand for the zero portion, so other fixed rate protocols require DAI liquidity. So any of these third-party providers are still going to require Maker to provide the DAI to take the opposite side, but there's no easy way to generate it, and then you also have additional protocol risk.
Yeah, this is all like closed loop inside Maker. But the other way, I mean, Maker could provide liquidity, right, to external protocols that are doing like fixed rate lending. But the issues that come with that is like Maker has to compete with other liquidity providers. And like there's uncertainty in terms of the rate that Maker would receive. It's not defined upfront, or maybe it could be defined, but it's external risk. This is like just accounting, I would say. And the reason is it's like, we could probably like find a way to like remove the zeros entirely, but currently like this is like the design that we've come up with. One side effect it could have is like basically like an increase in DAI supply. Yeah, it's overall it's like, yeah. So basically when claim fee get issued, everything else is accounted for upfront, like using debt. If there is demand in the market for zeros at some point, right? And if Maker wants to incentivize that, I don't know, we're calling it like selective DSR, where those who want to lock up their DAI for a certain maturity, like they're telling Maker, hey, we want to be like DAI holders for a certain duration. Like that's the maturity transformation. So if they're willing to do that, Maker could sell zeros for a discount. I don't think that demand is there right now, so they just can't just stay locked like until maturity. But if it ever like happens, they could be like prematurely unlocked from the adapter, and the debt can be settled like from the sale proceeds of like the zero itself. We just like didn't put that in the proposal. But if there's actual demand for zeros, like that can like we could like ease it. But for user experience, like with this as a starting point, claim fee issuance and claim fee sales like are not limited by like what happens on the zero liquidity side. We've disconnected those two, at least in time, like may not happen at the same time. And we've kind of made them like independent of each other. So then we've had some questions, right? They're like, oh, you're like, everything is like accounted from the stability fee, from the surplus buffer. So it's like, is Maker like tying its hands by issuing fixed rate debt, and would losses be offset? Like fixed rates got issued at like 2%, but then Maker increases rates to 3%. Is Maker going to pay more out of the surplus buffer to offset like losses? But what I want to say is like, there are no losses, but it also depends on the framing. And like the reason I say there are no losses is Maker has to start treating these two as like two different buckets: fixed rate debt bucket and a variable rate debt bucket. So the fixed rate debt bucket works on its own cadence, like monthly issuances, whatever surplus revenue that's received from there is like received like upfront, and then that's like completely like that's accounted for in that way. Variable rate is constant. Like when the variable rate is changed, the debt that falls under that bucket would just like basically would pay that rate continuously. So two different buckets. There is nothing that needs to be offset. Like revenues from variable rate bucket are not used to offset any gains or losses like on the fixed rate debt bucket. This is basically like, that's why I said like we want Maker to become the fixed rate lending protocol, and this is why like when it does become that, like there would be like two buckets of debt, and the fixed rate lending side and the variable rate lending side, and both would have like their own calculations in terms of like how revenue is received, accounted for, like what how much like demand there is, like what to sell, what price to sell, etc. And yeah, I think we can like take some questions, but I mean I've made all these points. Market rate discovery, like the ability for market rate discovery, become a fixed rate protocol without external dependencies, new users, new revenue stream, novel product for growth core unit, like, and then improve vault owner retention and discourage vault migration. I don't know, could be as a feature. The other reason could be like, I don't know, vault owners like could get a better rate, maybe they move out, but like you lock them in upfront, right? Could lock them in upfront for a certain duration. And there's always like, the rates are short term right now, but there are like certain vault owners who are like long-term vault owners. They intend to stick around. We don't know they haven't expressed the duration that they want to stick around inside the protocol, inside Maker, but we know that there are like long-term vault owners, there are short-term vault owners. Like, why don't we like offer a way for long-term vault owners to lock in using like claim fee tokens? And that way, the short-term vault owners, maybe like there's an opportunity to like move rates more aggressively, right? This is like some of the concepts that were discussed in the past, having like an instant access module that changes the rates like at a much faster cadence. So maybe we'll be able to aggressively change rates on the fixed rate, on the variable rate bucket, if we know for sure that the fixed rate, the long-term vault owners won't be pissed off because they've like hedged it for the duration that they intend to be around. And I mean, the only other request is like, consider this proposal like from multiple vantage points. There's not like one, I don't think there's one vantage point where it like makes absolute sense. There's like safety of the Maker protocol, user experience, the risk to vault owners in terms of like having to use a new collateral type versus just staying with the collateral type with the vault management infrastructure that they're using, not having to like move back and forth, emergency shutdown, and then the flexibility of integrations that come with like having to deal with like I guess like something like a token, right? Our ability to basically integrate with others. I'll just put this slide on, but basically, yeah, we can. This is the big complicated diagram we just put like in our proposal. But I hope like this presentation was able to explain like what's happening. So step one was the issuance part. Step two was the auction and like the user's wallet basically purchasing this and then sending DAI into the surplus buffer directly. And step three is like the basically collecting yield and offsetting whatever like variable rate that was added to their vault debt.
So
yeah,
I guess it's kind of our ability to issue these claim tokens is kind of capped by like our available debt within a particular ilk.
Yeah, it would be it can only be I mean, so in terms of like, you could think about it two ways, right? If you think it's only going to be like existing, if you're like, it's only going to be like existing vault owners that will avail this feature, then sure, it's like it's capped by a percentage of like current debt. But then if you're thinking about this as like the ability to chase new growth or find new users, we'd be able to like, I mean, end of the day, that would be like total debt expansion, and fixed rate is always going to be a fraction of it, but it's still like we could like go after like new territories for growth.
So what would happen if a bunch of vault owners like close, like say we issue $1 million in claim and then everybody flees to a new protocol and suddenly we have less than $1 million in DAI outstanding?
So the surplus buffer is accounted for, like the DAI in there is like basically there's no way for them to take that back. So in a sense, like, I mean, it's like basically like Maker getting like a warning, right? But it's like, it's not losing the stability fees. Maybe like we have like, I mean, if that scenario ever happens, there's still revenue that it has like Maker has collected upfront that can use to correct that issue. The second thing is, it's the vault owners are not like penalized by Maker. They don't have to be penalized. If they want to close it early, they're exposed to the market rate. They have to sell that claim fee token to somebody else in the market. And at that point, they could make a gain or a loss, but it's based on market conditions. And that's like, yeah, there's no need to like incorporate like a penalty like within the design, because it's just like decided with the market.
Awesome. That makes sense. Thank you.
Hi, Vamsi. I'm thinking from a user interaction perspective. Would it be possible to hide the claim fee ETH token, to simply hide it?
Yeah.
So the user don't see it, because with your design, it's possible to to secure a fixed rate for, let's say, 20% or 50% or 80% for the vault. But for simplicity's sake, we could hide the entire token and then simply have a checkbox, you want fixed rate, and then it costs so and so much upfront.
Yeah.
Because people might tear their hair out if they're gonna claim tokens and get paid.
That's Maker already uses this thing called a CDP manager contract, right? So there's the actual VAT, and then there's a CDP manager that adds additional functionality to vault owners, creates like a CDP ID, and then it adds functionality. So we'd have to do something like that similar. So we'd create a CDP manager, like probably call it like fixed rate vault manager, that would handle like the interactions with like claim tokens, offsetting yield and everything. And so as a user, like if they use that to open a vault, behind the scenes, it could basically like wrap the interactions. The only reason we've spoken about tokens is to just show the flexibility, right? I mean, when I say a token, like somebody who's listening to this call is like a trader, they can understand that. Somebody is an integrator, they could probably say, they could figure out a way in which like they could like integrate it into their experience, but it can be wrapped. That's where like smart contracts are like so helpful, right? You can always add restrictions.
Yeah.
So,
all right. Thank you.
Yeah. So I kind of want to ask a little bit about the auctioning of the fee tokens. So it seems to me that that's kind of the key step, and that's where the risk would really arise for Maker, because really the risk Maker is taking on here is the interest rate fluctuation risk. There's some you collect the equivalent of some fixed rate up front, and then you're committing to pay that out to fund the fee tokens later on.
So yeah.
So how do you ensure those auctions are competitive? In the bootstrapping phase, I can imagine it might be necessary, for example, that MakerDAO directly participates. Otherwise, if it's just the single person who's looking to hedge out their risk and they're the only one who bids, right? They can just bid some insanely low amount, right? So you've got to think carefully about that, I think.
So which is where I think the limit price comes in. So in the auction, like Maker could define a limit price, right? Like a limit order, and if it has to sell, it has to sell like above that, or there would basically be no sale. And when there's no sale, the issuance can be like basically like just reverted back, and then the tokens can be removed from circulation. So that's one. Sorry, I missed like there's another like point you made, right? I missed that.
Yeah, I mean, I think being able to set a minimum price in the auctions, I think takes care of most of it, because that can, Maker can decide like what's the cheapest fixed rate we'd be willing to offer, on a particular ilk, and set that in the auction. And then if the market gives better, that's great, and if not, hopefully we set that well.
Yeah. And until now, like basically we only had the opportunity to set it, and then so the market discovery part is additional. But I mean, worst case, if it's like basically if it's, I don't know, somebody, if it's a vault owner, right? Could be like a big vault owner. This can be so how the claim fee token, if it still is a token, finds its hands into the right vault owners is basically up to our creativity. Like one example is like the growth core unit is doing business development. there's an upfront cost to like onboarding somebody as a vault user. Like they have to understand like everything about Maker, set up the vault, set up the infrastructure, making sure that it's like it'll never get liquidated, all that. What if like we get Growth Core unit had a bunch of these tokens, right? And they offer like, I don't know, a 6-month promo code to use a vault. So they just give it for free, the claim fee tokens. And then that entices like somebody to open a vault like on the main like Ether or on a main collateral type. And they just get like free stability fees for 6 months. And then after that, they're just a user, right? They're now a sticky user. So it's like, it opens up like I think there can be like a wide variety of like creative solutions into how the actual like pure yield tokens can find their way to like vault owners. So how this will interact with a peg at scale, I wish I had like more answers. I've mostly been thinking about this as like adding like a completely new lending category to Maker, like fixed rate lending. And it's like, I mean, I think these are problems basically that we have to solve. It's basically, I mean, this is about like growth, right? We don't do it, somebody else would do it. Rather like we do it and we figure out like the problems. But the good thing is like none of this has to be like scale. It's all under the control of Maker to the largest extent possible, and could start off with experiments and then slowly ramp it up based on like what works, what doesn't work. That's also true. Should be new supply so good for peg. That's yeah. That's yeah.
Vamsi, I'm thinking, is it 100% necessary to integrate this with the Maker protocol? Is it not possible to do a more of a standalone development of this?
We could. So two parts to that answer. Like one, the issues that we think that come with a standalone development is stability fees are set by Maker. So are there folks who would want to bet on it? Or what kind of incentives would it create for governance to, like, let's say governance is firmly in control of the rate. Folks like make bets on that rates, but then governance could basically like, I don't know, take one side of the bet and then set the rate in a way where it pays off for them. So it creates all these like incentives where I don't think a market could form, like a robust market could form at scale that yeah, that's not like worried about like Maker governance in the first place, like specific to like Maker stability fees. And the second thing is like liquidity of zeros. If DAI holders are willing to hold like zero coupon DAI, if there's demand for that, we could like push out like some of the complexity out from Maker. So that's why it's built like, it's built with that collateral type, but the moment there's demand for that, it can be pushed out. Maker need not take like the risk of it. Like there's no risk, but need not keep zeros on Maker books for a long time. So yeah, it can be done, but it's just that it's like, yeah, who wants to bet on stability fees? Right? That's set by like Maker governance.
Yeah, all right. But that would basically be like the real world where people bet on stability fees of the.
It could, yeah. The other thing is it could still be done. Like that could still be done on its own. This was basically, this is like here, Maker and vault owners already have an existing relationship. It's just like leveling up that relationship to this like fixed rate to fixed rates. Maker is still like as one of the counterparties gets like a whole list of benefits, collecting like stability fees upfront, retaining users. So there's benefits to Maker for entering into this relationship. There's benefit to vault owners. So when we see like a synergistic relationship like that, why not like fill that gap? If there's a need for a external market, that could still be done. Like there's no reason for this to be like the only thing. So the Deco instance is customized and deployed, right? We could deploy like 5 instances. We could deploy like one for DSR, for example, if there's demand for that. We could deploy, I don't know, like it's too early to comment, but there are like it's all about maturity, right? Maturity maturity dates pop up like in many scenarios. Deco is basically a protocol that can slap a maturity date on in wherever like it's needed, and then handle like issuance and settlement after maturity. So there's no reason for it to be like one single like instance.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, please look at the proposal. Like we have, I can just have, if I have a minute, a second, can basically. So we have like some technical docs. I know I've received some comments saying like, this is like, yeah, why are these docs like, why, like, these are like written not from the perspective of like Maker or this integration. It's just written from the perspective where like, hey, if you have a problem about like, if you're dealing with yield tokens, if you're dealing with maturities, Deco could be customized to solve your needs. So that's the docs. But then we have a Maker fixed rates wall section. Here we describe like how we intend to modify like some functions within Deco to achieve like the goals that we described, how like said issuance and settlement, how we modify that emergency shutdown. So we have like some docs, have a really long white paper, but you don't have to read everything. Just interested in smart contracts, you pick that section, just maybe like do a quick browse. And if you ever want to reach us out publicly, you can comment on the post or send us an email at like info@deco.money, and we'll be happy to answer like any questions that you have.
Actually, one really quick question before we end here. For this integration, how much would be controlled by Maker governance versus Deco governance, or is there some sharing of power there?
No, there's like for this, like, yeah, everything that we saw, there's no Deco governance. I think like for Maker, or at least at Maker scale, right, don't want to introduce any new risks. So that's why like Deco is designed as instances. So when we deploy that instance, there are a couple like only governance functions. It's under like pause proxy, like basically completely under the control of Maker. What we would do is like, our hope is like, basically our goal is to we'll do that proposal like maybe like in a bit, but we're trying to propose a core unit, and we basically help like write portion of the spells that need to be executed by governance. But mostly it's all under the control of Maker governance. By issuance, like settlement actually, like Maker governance need not step in for settlement. Settlement is automatic once the maturity date is hit. So it's only really issuance that governance needs to control, and everything in Deco related to issuance is under MakerDAO.
Cool, thanks.
Nice. Are there any last questions? We're at the top of the hour, so. All right. So yeah, thank you, Vamsi, for coming and making this a bit clearer. I think we're all quite interested by the technology behind it. Yeah, I think it was quite clarifying. I apologize again for the technical challenges that we faced and for Bloomberging your call. Hopefully it didn't damage this too much. And yeah, right now we have another call. It's up on the forum for real world assets. So if anyone wants to keep joining us there, you can. And Vamsi, anything else you would like to say before we close this call?
All good. Thanks everyone for joining.
Great. Thanks everyone for coming.